Want to give a quick shout out to all of my patrons. Thank you so much for continuing to support my channel. So let's start with what Realm of the Elderlings is all about. So Realm of the Elderlings is the setting of a completed fantasy series by Robin Hobb. And this is composed of 5 different interconnected sub-series, including the Farseer Trilogy, Liveship Traders, the Tawny Man, the Rainwild Chronicles, and the Fitz and the Fool. All of these are trilogies with the exception of the Rainwild Chronicles, which is a quartet, and these total 16 books. The basic plot of the series is that the world was once inhabited by the Elderlings, fantastical beings closely allied with dragons, whose civilization collapsed following a massive earthquake. In the centuries following the Elderlings' decline, new kingdoms arise, and the series' protagonists struggle to understand and restore all that has been lost. The majority of the novels are from the perspective of Fitz Chivalry Farseer, the bastard son of the ruling family of the 6 duchies, who is trained as a warrior and assassin in service to his nation, and explore his lifelong relationships with his complicated heritage, his bonded wolf, and the Fool, an albino with a mysterious past who believe Fitz is the catalyst destined to transform the world. Other books focus on the traders of nearby Bingtown, their magical live ships, and the corrosive rivers of the Rain Wilds, whose secrets are the main source of their wealth. So let's talk about the pros and cons of the series, starting with the pros. And the first and the obvious one is the character writing. The character writing that Robin Hobb does in the Realm of the Elderlings is without a doubt the best character writing in any fantasy book of all time. Now that's a bold claim, but one that not only do I feel confident in, but you will regularly hear told when people talk about how wonderful this series is. Now we're going to talk about cons later, so I'm not going to sit here and say that every single thing about this series is just these huge superlatives, but this I have to say. The character writing is incredible. I can't understand how she has so masterfully put everything together here. It's not just because of the wide range and cast here that exists, which it does. It's that every single character, and I'm not using that lightly, every single character that shows up here is perfectly written so that you understand their emotions, their motivations, what makes them tick. You question, like you do with real people, that they actually have a real brain going on that's ticking and making these decisions. It doesn't feel like somebody's writing these characters. They feel like real people. And that's impressive. I mean, you've got not only the main character of Fitz, but all of these people that bring in. I mean, you can bring up a name on one of these characters, and I will be able to go for a very long time talking in depth about these characters because of how much they have stuck in my brain the many months since I finished the series. And I suspect it's going to be like that for my entire life. That's how much of an impact this series has made on me and the characters in particular. Now, the next thing that everybody's going to talk about here is the character growth. And this is unsurpassed as well. And it's unsurpassed because of the amount of time that Robin Hobb has spent on the main character here. And not just the main character, but I want to focus on the main character. But how the length of the age gaps that we're going from here. So you start with Fitz as a little boy. And by the end of the 16-book series, Fitz is an older man. So you get to see all these different stages of his life and what has made him the person that he eventually becomes. He kind of becomes like a part of your life. And when he goes through trauma and these bad things that we're going to talk about in just a moment, you go through them with him. And when the series is done, you feel like somebody that you personally know, that you no longer get to grow along with them. It's a magical experience that you're never going to really feel again. Now, and I could say that's a con. I'm not going to say it though, but it's so well done that it's going to make you look at other book series after this and judge them in a negative way, because no one will ever have character growth that is done as masterfully as this. Now, another big pro that I've seen talked about a lot is the realistic representation of a teenager. Now, he doesn't spend all of these books as a teenager, clearly. I told you he turns into an older man. But in the first 3 books here, he does. And most of the time, or almost all of the time that I read about teenagers, especially from a first-person perspective, which most of these books are in, they are one of multiple different things. Either they are way too smart. They make all these amazing decisions. They're wise beyond their years. And now, I bet as I say that, if you've read a lot of fantasy, many different characters are popping into your head of people that remind you of this. Or they're the opposite, and they are over the top edgy. They are incredibly immature, and these really overly dramatic themes. Fitz is the first that I've seen that really nails what it's like to be a teenager going through world-changing events. He doesn't handle them perfectly. He makes bad decisions fairly often, but he makes them for what he believes to be the best choice. He makes some good decisions too. But you really feel like this is a real person. And that's very hard for an adult writer to do, talking about somebody who is growing up still in their kind of adolescence. It's really impressive. Another thing that is high up in the pro column is the prose. The way the words are written on the paper is just lyrical. It's not like a poet writing, but it's just magical. You will sit back very often while reading this book and the series and go, wow, she can write her butt off. It's amazing. Now, I love a lot of different writing styles. I like some writing styles. In fact, I love some writing styles that are a lot more basic. Think like a Brandon Sanderson, where he's really trying to, plot you through this book and write it in a way that everybody can understand. And while everybody can understand what Robin Hobb's writing here, I don't think not everybody will appreciate it until you get to a certain adult phase in your life where you've gone through a lot of different life experiences and you can feel the emotions dripping through these pages. It's impressive. Now, another one in this column is going to be the way that all of these different 5 series tie into each other. Very often, when you get these really long series, you can get these books that don't perfectly weave together, especially when, not all of these trilogies were meant to exist. Multiple times she planned on stopping the series and then decided, you know what, I've figured out more of the story, I'm going to keep it going. And that is a recipe for disaster. Think of TV shows where they overlive their welcome. Very often TV shows do this. And it's very infrequent where you'll have a show that just plots out one season at a time. Now, there have been some notable examples of this. Breaking Bad did that. And Breaking Bad, in my opinion, is a wonderful top-tier TV show. But this is the literary form of that, where she finishes and then she goes, all right, what do I want to do next? And the fact that they can all weave together, especially in the last trilogy that brought all of it back home again, is crazy good. Now, another obvious one is that this is a completed story. Now, that seems like an easy to low-hanging fruit, but if you're a fan of fantasy books, you will know that this is not the most common of things. Very, very frequently, you will have authors who've either petered out, they can't quite make it, George R. R. Martin, Patrick Rothfuss, Scott Lynch, or you will have series that have a long ways to go. Think basically all of Brandon Sanderson's series. But this one's done. You can get that feeling of I can get to a beginning, middle, and end here and really get everything that I was meant to get out of this story. Another huge, huge benefit of this, and this sounds bad, but it's good, is that unless you're just a heartless person, you are going to cry. It is rare, very rare, for a book in a series to literally evoke emotions out of me. I'm a kind of a dry reader at times, but this series multiple times had tears quite literally falling in heaps out of my face. And it's really cool to have a book that can do that to your emotions, that'll strike you in that way. And I don't know that I know a single person that has read this that didn't get teary-eyed at one point or more likely, many, many different points. Now, this is also very impressive in that there are very well-written animal characters here. Animal characters in fantasy books is a fairly regular concept. I don't think that you're ever going to find animal companions here, and there's more than one, that you're going to feel this emotionally invested in. They don't, I mean, I don't want to ruin anything here about the way that they can, coordinate with the world and communicate their thoughts, but you are going to feel a part of these different creatures, and it's a really special feeling. One of the last things I'll mention here is that this is very long. I mean, this is almost as long as the Wheel of Time, and maybe this is a negative for you, but for me it's a positive, in that you're not going to read 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of these books and know that it's coming to an end. There's a very long journey to go here, and you're going to get many thousands of pages of worth out of this series. And the last that I'll say, and this is really just a personal one, but these are very well-written ship sequences. I love me some ships. I love me some boats. I love a pirate story. And one of the trilogies, Liveship Traders, is all about that. So it's not all positives, though. Let's go over some of these cons. And I don't think there's a ton, but there are some very real ones. And this is true for any book series. But the first is, this is a very slow series. The most highly commented thing that I hear when people have a problem with this series is the pace. It's kind of glacial at times. It starts that way, it ends that way. That's not what these books are all about. This doesn't rank in my top 10 or top 15 or 20 favorite series when it comes to plot lines. But that's not the point. The point is the emotions. The point is the characters. That's what the series is all about. So if you're going into this wanting some action-packed, major plot progression, you're just not going to see it here. And that can turn off a lot of people. It usually would turn off me. I always would look at myself as a plot-first type of reader. Robin Hobb's the first person that really changed that for me. But, it is what it is here. Another is, and I mentioned this when I talked about the crying thing and the positives, but this is also a negative. There's a lot of very depressing things that happen in this series. Not depressing in the gore realm or the, really brutal acts of, sexual violence or these things that can exist in fantasy books. But you're going to get so emotionally invested in these characters, especially Fitz, and a lot of bad things happen to this person. He goes through a lot of loss. He goes through a lot of trauma. And, you're going to have a lot of negative feelings as you go through this. Now, there are, the highest of highs that exist here. But this is a story about a character who keeps getting knocked down, and he keeps trying to find the will and the motivation to get back up again. But he keeps getting knocked down, and that's a very consistent theme here. A very big negative also is that the quartet that I mentioned, the Rainwild Chronicles, is not great. You are universally going to hear people say that it's their least favorite of the books. You're going to hear some people say that they hate them. And it can turn people off. They can say, you know what, I'm done. That's what the rest of these books are. Now, that's not how the series ends. The last trilogy is, kind of universally recognized is one of the best. It's incredible. For me, it's the second best. And it's just some of my favorite books ever are part of that trilogy. But yeah, these 4 books are not great. Now, I happen to like 2 of the books number 3 and 4 from this quartet, but the first 2 are not great. Now, you can't speed through them. They're really worthwhile to read through so you get the whole scope of this story. Reading a cliff notes of this isn't going to do it justice, but you kind of got to power through them and just know the promise that better books are yet to come. Now, I will say also that the last book in the initial trilogy is not great. In retrospect, I like it a lot more because the final trilogy of this, the last 3 books, really show why that book was needed. And as I do a reread of this eventually, I'm probably going to love that book. But on first read, it is really slow. It feels like not a lot happens. Now, I've heard some people say that they love it, but I think the overwhelming opinion from first readers is it's going to leave a little bit of a sour taste in your mouth and make you not motivated to keep going. Now, you need to if you've gone that far, because the next 3 are, I think, my 3 favorite in the series. So, yeah, push through if you're not making it. You got to make it through it, or just skip to the next 3 and go back eventually. But yeah, that is a very real con. And the last one is, and I put this in prose, but this is very long. Now, if you're a slower reader, the series will take you an extremely long time to read. It's 16 quite large books. So yeah, I view that as a pro. A lot of people view that as a con. Now let's talk about how intimidating this series is. And I want to pose a very simple question and then answer it. Should you be intimidated by this series? No. No, you should not. It is easy, though, to look at it that way, in large part because of how long this is. Any long series that you have to read in order, because there's a lot of series like Discworld that are like 40 books, but you can kind of read them in lots of different orders, so it doesn't feel intimidating. This one feels like, wow, what am I getting into? And yeah, that's true. It is very long, but it's also easy to consume. This isn't a Malazan. I did a whole recap of Malazan that inspired this video, and if you haven't seen it, click up above. I'd love you to watch it, but that one is not easy to consume. Now, I also said in this segment that no, you should not be intimidated, and I gave a lot of reasons why, but this one is very easy. Anybody can read this. If you're even a young adult, this is an easy book to read. It's not got a lot of different characters. You'll remember everything. If you kind of forgot somebody, she'll go back and explain it pretty easily to you. You don't got to take notes or anything like that. You do kind of got to get yourself in the right headspace for it, but yeah, it shouldn't be intimidating from a difficulty from the book itself perspective. You're also going to know pretty quickly whether this series is for you or not, because as I mentioned earlier, this is really all about the writing style, and you're going to know real quick if that writing style is for you. Personally, I ate it up. I did have problems with some of the plot progression that got resolved later on, but I was like, man, she's such a good writer that I'm having a really good experience. I'm going to talk in a little bit about what to do if you're not enjoying that experience, and maybe it's not for you, but I think you're going to know within the first 100 pages whether you're liking this or not. Now let's talk reading tips, and I've got 7 of them for you. Let's start at number 1, and that is you gotta go into this with the right expectations. This is not your normal fantasy series. This is an emotional grind. So get yourself in the right headspace, understand what you're gonna get here, read those pros and cons, and understand so you're not going into this thinking that you're gonna get something that you do not. Number 2 is don't rush through this. Do not skim and savor the prose here. There's a lot of fantasy series where I would give you the opposite advice. Wheel of Time, for example. If you want to skim some of those chapters and some of those little, very healthy explanations of every single thing in a room, what color a dress was. Let's talk about 5 paragraphs about the dress. Yeah, go ahead and skim. You're not going to miss a lot. Yeah, not the case here. You're going to want to read every single word. It's all important. You need to understand it, and that's the whole point of these books. Number 3 is, don't power through the series. This is an emotional grind. You're not going to feel great about things if you just go back to back to back to back on these books. Schedule yourself in to read some books that'll break this up a little bit, something a little more lighthearted that can get your head in the right space, so that you're not just kind of getting so down. Now, I liked getting down here. It was a different change of pace, but I don't think I would have enjoyed my experience if I just went back to back on these things. Number 4 is it's completely normal to not enjoy the first trilogy, but to love the second one, and vice versa. They're very different. So the second trilogy and that quartet are all written in the third person. They have a lot of different point of views, but the rest of the books are all first person, and they follow one character. So, I happen to like them all. I like that second trilogy the most by a long shot. But if you're not enjoying the first trilogy, don't say, Realm of the Elderlings, it's not for me. Go read the first book in that next trilogy. There's a really good chance that you'll fall in love with it. Number 5 is, and I mentioned this a lot earlier, but the last book in the first trilogy is weaker. Understand that. Don't think, oh, now it's all going to go downhill. That's not the case. Everybody says this. So if you liked the first 2 and you didn't like the third one, that is normal. Accept it. move on. Number 6 is do not stress about remembering everything. When characters come back up after a long time of missing them, you don't need to go rack your brain on trying to figure out who these people are. She will explain it in short order. It's okay. You don't have to take notes here. It's really easy. Just keep on reading. All will make sense. And my last tip, and this ties into the last one, do not Google anything. You are not safe to go trust the wiki. You are not safe to go Google, oh, who was this character? You will find out something that you did not want to find out. I promise you. It happened to me. It'll happen to you. Don't do it. Just trust in the process. Don't Google a thing. All right, so let's talk about these 5 different series and kind of what they're all about. Now, I am going to be talking very light spoilers. I don't view these as spoilers, but if you're like a spoiler stickler and any little thing will throw you off here, then you're going to consider these spoilers. But again, I do not. I think you're safe, but I just want to throw it out there so nobody comes after me. First trilogy is the Farseer Trilogy. This is a first-person trilogy, and this follows the early life of Fitz Chivalry Farseer in the Kingdom of the Six Duchies. Fitz, he's got this aptitude in 2 different types of magic. They're very fun magic systems, and he's learning on how to deal with these. One of the magic systems he is not supposed to have, and everyone looks down on it. So he's got to secretly try to figure this one out. The other is very special, and he's trying to be trained in it. But that's a lot of what this first book is all about, is this training to become the man he will eventually be. He's also training to become an assassin. It's in the name. The first book is Assassin's Apprentice. Now, this is not an assassin book. Now, that seems strange, but very few assassinations happen here. I don't really know if there's even more than like 1 or 2 in the whole series. That's not what this is. But it is what he's being trained to do, and it really impacts him, and really the relationship that he has with this teacher. He's also helping his uncle to wage war against a nearby nation. I don't want to say any more than that because that would ruin it, but it is a central plot line here. And lastly, there is an incredible amount of drama involving another one of his uncles, and them kind of unintentionally or unintentionally trying to ruin everything. And he ends up right in the middle of this. Now, the next trilogy is the Liveship Traders Trilogy. This is a totally different characters, totally different location. In fact, the location here isn't even on the map in the first book. It's way far away. This is in the third person. There's multiple POVs. It follows a few main characters from Bingtown, which is a trader city. This trader city is very well known because they're the only people that have these live ships. These ships are, several generations of their owners literally die on the ship. Their blood seeps in, and I think it's 3 generations. The ship becomes sentient. The masthead, like whenever you see like a ship in olden times, you saw this woman on the front of the ship. They would turn into a real person that can talk and that can do magical things with the ship and guide it around. And now these ships are the only ships that can go up the Rain-Wild River. And up that river are these traders that they can trade with and get these magical goods. And they're the only ones that can go. Because the ships are made out of the wood that comes from there. Everybody else, if they try to go up, their ships will just collapse in the water. It's corrosive waters, and it just doesn't work. And so it follows these people from Bingtown in their trading adventures. There's pirates involved. There's crazy adventures. And at the beginning of this story, Althea, who I would say is kind of like the main character, although there's a few, she's expected to be given the live ship as she should. But as soon as it quickens into a real person, it's given to her brother-in-law, and it follows all the drama surrounding that. It's a wonderful series and my favorite of the bunch. The next trilogy is the Tawny Man Trilogy. Now, this follows the adult life of Fitz Chivalry, and it takes place a long time after the events of the Farseer Trilogy. There's amazing character growth here. It's really special to read when you get this huge time jump and you learn about who he's become, why he's become this person. It's a very different Fitz chivalry that we knew in the first trilogy, and it's really special to watch this growth and see the directions that this plot takes you. Really unexpected directions. You think you know what the series is about in the first book. By the time that this trilogy is done, it's about something totally different, and I love the direction it took. Now the fourth is this quartet. It's the Rainwild Chronicles. It follows up the events immediately following the Liveship Traders trilogy, and it would be a pretty big spoiler for me to say really anything that this is about, so I'm not gonna. I will say though that everybody agrees this is the weakest of the books. The first two in particular were really a struggle for me. I quite frankly didn't like at all the second book in it, but I loved the third and fourth books. I gave them both 5 stars. You start to see where this whole series is going. You start to see why this different story is being weaved in. Some characters start to get mixed in from both of the different, sequences here. It's really cool to see the direction that Hobbs starts to take it. And the last one is the Fitz and the Fool trilogy. Now this takes place a good amount of time after the Tawny Man trilogy. Fitz is now an older man at this point. Because of his magic, he doesn't look like an old man, but he is. And I can't say anything else other than saying that the series wraps up beautifully and perfectly. Alright, finally in this video, I am going to rank the 16 different books, and I'm going to put them into different categories. The first category is going to be the bad. And so this is number 16, and this is Dragon Haven. This is the second book in the Rainwild Chronicles quartet, and oh man, I hated this book. I finished it. I'm glad I finished it because I didn't want to peter out in the series, but it's rough. I mean, it's like a YA story. I don't love YA stories. The plot was really simple. I mean, it's a journey story. You know where it's going to end, and it takes many hundreds of pages to get from the beginning to the end, and I don't feel like a lot happened. Now, that's the only bad one. Now, let's go to the okay, and there's 2 books here. So number 15 is going to be Dragon Keeper. This is the first book in the Rainwild Chronicles. Now, it did have a lot of the same plots, a lot of the same YA stuff that went into the one I just talked about, but there are some other characters that kind of get featured here that I really like to see their motivations, and I got some worth out of this. Number 14 is going to be Assassin's Quest. This is the 3rd book in the Farseer Trilogy, and I struggled with this. Again, it's a lot of going from point A to point B. There's not as much, it's like half the book, but it felt like it just lasted forever. I kept wanting them to get to the locations so the plot would progress, and it felt like dang near the end of the book by the time that happened. And it was just like, man, they're really dragging this out. And so it really kind of soured me on that book. Otherwise, I liked the first half of the book. Second half of the book, yeah, rough. Now the good. And so number 13, this is going to be City of Dragons. This is the 3rd book in the Rainwild Chronicles. I like this book a lot. It's really good. We finally got where the characters were going, and then it felt like the series really started here. I said earlier in the video that I gave this a 5 out of 5. I don't think that's true. I think I gave this a 4.5 out of 5. But yeah, I liked it a lot, and I can't really say much of what this is. Obviously, there's dragons involved. It's called City of Dragons. But yeah, I liked that the plot all started to come together. I was kind of soured from the previous books, but I was really getting invested here. Number 12 is Golden Fool. This is the 2nd book in the Tawny Man Trilogy. And yeah, it's good. I didn't think it was nearly as good as the first book in the trilogy, and certainly not as good as the last book in the trilogy. Kind of had this weird middle book syndrome where, you felt like the plot was really going to take off. Now, I liked all the emotional investment that we got up until this point, but right when the book's about to take off, it ends. And it's essentially a cliffhanger, and you're like, stay tuned for the next episode, folks. And yeah, I didn't love that aspect of it, but I still liked the book a lot. All right, now we're to the very good. Number 11, this is going to be Blood of Dragons. This is the last in the Rainwild Chronicles. And yeah, this book rocks. Again, I had some souring feelings on a lot of these characters that didn't make me love it as much, but things really pop off here. There's a lot of action. Everything starts to make sense about why this happened, and it got me geared up and ready for the last 3 books in this series. Number 10 is Fool's Errand. This is the first in the Tawny Man trilogy. I liked it. It was odd in that the first, couple hundred pages, maybe 150, like nothing happens, and I loved it. I loved learning more about this character and how he has gone through all this tremendous growth and finding out, what has happened to him in the time since we last saw Fitz. It also had this odd thing in that, it set up this antagonist, but it resolves the story by the end of this. So it finishes this trilogy and you're like, where's the story going now? It feels like we solved the problem. So an odd kind of pacing thing here, but yeah, very good book. Number 9 is Fool's Quest. This is the second book in the Fitz and the Fool, and I liked it. It kind of had a lot of similar problems that I just talked about with the second book in Fool's Quest, where it felt very much like, it felt a lot like Golden Fool, where it had this middle books thing going on, where there's a lot happened at the beginning, a lot happens at the end. Feels like there's this filler book. Now, I love this filler book, but it is a lot of filler. Number 8 is Assassin's Apprentice. This is the first book in the entire series. And yeah, it's real good from start to finish. It's slower. It's a lot of building up these characters so you get to know who they are. I don't often love the build-up phase of these books, but yeah, it's very well done. It's very memorable. I'll never forget it. But yeah, not quite as good as some of the other books in the series. Number 7 is Royal Assassin. This is the only book in the Farseer I haven't talked about, the second book. And strangely enough, the middle book I thought was the best in this trilogy. It felt like it had its own thing going on. I loved the dynamic here between Fitz and his uncles. I love that you've finally seen him progress to a certain level of competence and really becoming the man that he eventually becomes. Now, for 6 more books, these are the incredible. These are the top tier 5 out of 5s. Starting at number 6, this is Fool's Fate. This is the third book in the Tawny Man Trilogy. I talked earlier about how I felt like Golden Fool was a big setup for the third book. Yeah, this is that third book, and it knocks it out of the park. I was shocked. I was rooting for these characters. I needed to see them succeed, and I won't say whether they did or did not, because a lot of bad things happen in this series, but it's very satisfying. Number 5 is Ship of Magic. This is the first book in the Liveship Traders. God, I love pirate stories. This sets it all up. It took a little bit of build up here before things started rolling, but as soon as it did, it didn't give up at any point. Number 4 is Fool's Assassin. This is the first in the Fitz and the Fool, the final trilogy. I can't really say much about this other than the whole book takes place in a single location. So it feels like, how could I possibly like this? I love big world building. But they introduce this other character, a character that I will never forget. I love this character dearly. And we get this, for the first time in these Fitz books, you actually get another perspective, and it's awesome. Now, number 3 is The Mad Ship. This is the second book in the Liveship Traders trilogy. And yeah, this plot is just rolling at this point. It's one of my favorite books of all time. This pirate adventure, the ups and downs, the thrills, the twists, it's got it all. Number 2 is Assassin's Fate, and I suspect most people are going to say this is their number 1 favorite because it ends the entire series on a beautiful note. It does do that. It's incredible for what it does, but it doesn't touch the first book, which is Ship of Destiny. The final book in the Liveship Traders is one of my favorite endings to a book of all time. This is like my top 3 or 4 favorite books of all time. It's incredible. I need more people to read it and go along on this journey with me. All right, that is it for this video. If I could sum up everything, go read Realm of the Elderlings. You've waited too long. This is an amazing series. I'd love you to partake. If you want to chat about this book with me, come join the Discord at the link below. It's the best Discord of all time. You're missing out if you haven't joined. Let's chat about this book or any book that involves fantasy. So, thank you so much for giving me your time, and as always, happy reading to you. Thanks again to all my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier patrons, Sky, Russell, Ron Reich, Romeo Mike, CJ, My Book is Lit, and Jamie.